Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson were both interested in Scream becoming a trilogy, and Miramax was financially inclined to agree. Once Craven was done with Music of the Heart, development began on the concluding chapter. However, Williamson was busy with a variety of other projects and could not commit to writing the script. He provided his notes and ideas to Miramax, who then hired Aaron Kruger. Williamson's script would have focused on a group of killers, a sort of ghost face cult. But due to the Columbine shooting, Miramax wanted to lessen the violence and play up the humor, so most of Williamson's ideas were thrown out. He later used his cult concept as the basis for his TV show, The Following. Kruger wrote the initial script and was rewriting while shooting until Miramax pulled him to work on a different project. Craven and another writer continued to rewrite the script, frustrating the cast. To further complicate things, Neve Campbell was only available for about 3 weeks of shooting. For context, it took 3 weeks just to shoot the third act of the first film, Everything at Stu's House. So Sidney's role is reduced with more focus on the supporting cast. To say the least, this production was a shit show, and they were still shooting stuff a month before release. Scream 3 was released on February 4th, 2000. The story begins with the murder of Cotton Wary. The killer leaves a picture of Maureen Prescott at the crime scene, leading Detective Kincaid to work with Gale and Dewey to catch the new killer as it becomes clear that he is targeting the cast of the currently filming Stab 3. Meanwhile, Sidney has gone into isolation working as a crisis counselor under a fake name in order to hide from any more potential copycats. However, the new killer draws her out of hiding. Everything converges at a birthday party for Stab 3's director, Roman. Everyone is killed except for Gale and Dewey, who the killer uses as bait to lure Sid to the party. The killer reveals himself as Roman, who then claims to be Sidney's half-brother. Maureen tried to be an actress in her younger years in the 70s. The man who would later produce the Stab films, John Milton, and a group of his peers raped Maureen, impregnating her. She abandoned the child and returned to Woodsboro, where she married Neil Prescott and had Sid. Roman tracked her down as an adult, but she rejected him. In his rage, Roman discovered Maureen's affairs and revealed them to Billy, encouraging him to kill Maureen. Sidney fights Roman, ultimately overcoming him before Dewey delivers the kill shot. Sidney's story is a solid evolution from Scream 2. She spent so much of that movie terrified of being hurt by the people around her, so she completely cut herself off for her own safety. That makes a lot of sense and is a good starting point. The issue is that it's an excuse for Sid to not be in a lot of the movie. The lead character spends a good chunk of the movie being sad by herself in a cabin. And once she finally joins the movie, she spends most of her screen time sitting sadly by herself in a police station. Every scene Sid is actually in is great, the best moments of the film. You get a sense of how this is all getting to her. Part of Williamson's idea would have involved a return to Woodsboro, because trilogies are cyclical like that. But the movie makes that the plot of Stab 3, so there are Hollywood sets that recreate the houses from the first film. So Sid is forced to return to Woodsboro, but in a strange, uncanny valley kind of way. That's really clever. And once she's there, she sees the recreation of the crime scene of her mother's murder, which is clearly traumatizing. It leads Sid and the detectives to question Sid's sanity a little bit. The movie brings up a couple of times that maybe a lot of this is just in her head. Not much is done with it, but I like the idea. I also like her small relationship with Kincaid. Campbell and Patrick Dempsey have a decent chemistry, and the latter plays his jaded detective part really well. There's clearly a lot of baggage and trauma he carries with him, and that's a part of why Sid can connect with him. Additionally, I think Sidney has the best moment of the series in this film during her fight with Roman. Her speech about responsibility is so great. I love that it concludes the running theme of the effects of violent cinema on people. Scream 1 played it kind of ambiguously, while Scream 2 made fun of the idea and laughed it off. Scream 3 just flat out denies it. Roman is responsible for his own actions. It's an incredibly cathartic monologue. We all know people who blame everyone but themselves for their own actions. And it works as a meta-commentary on the Scream films. Just on a character level, it's really satisfying to watch Sid say that she's tired of these people putting all of their issues on her. Due to Sidney's absence, the supporting cast takes up a lot more space, which is not a good thing because they're kinda bad. Gale and Dewey's story drives me up a wall in this. In Scream 2, it made sense for the two to fight. That was the natural evolution of the story. They fight in this one because it worked in Scream 2. It's that sequel thing of just repeating what worked in the last movie, but dumber. Gail's arc in Scream 2 was about her learning compassion and empathy. There were consequences for her actions. She's essentially learning the same lesson here, which is already boring, but it's also nonsensical because Gail didn't do anything wrong. The basic setup for the fight is that Gail and Dewey were together following the events of Scream 2, but once Dewey had recovered from his injuries, Gail decided to follow a career opportunity in Los Angeles, while Dewey decided to stay in Woodsboro. And the movie acts like Gail is the bad guy in this situation, that she's being selfish. But no, she's absolutely right. She had a great opportunity, she acted on it. If Dewey loved her so much, he should have followed her. And if the movie had framed it in such a way that Dewey needed to learn something, or at least a compromise thing where Gail needs to learn to be a little less career ambitious and Dewey needs to learn to be more supportive, that might have worked, but nope. Gail's story ends with her giving everything up for the sake of Dwight's feelings, which is lame and gross. There isn't much to say about the new characters. Parker Posey's a lot of fun as Jennifer, the actress playing Gail in the Stab films. She's really funny, and I dig Kincaid. They're the only two that feel like they're cut from the same cloth as the characters in the first two films. Angelina, Sarah, and Tom are generic cannon fodder. Angelina is a little weird in moments because she was supposed to be the second killer, and they changed their minds last minute. But there's nothing to any of these characters. Tyson is the Diet Coke version of Joel, but without any of the clever subversion that character brought, and he isn't nearly as funny. I think it would have been a little more fun if they had used actual actors playing themselves like Tori Spelling. I'm not sure why they went with fictional actors. Which leaves us with Roman, who is a big can of worms. The movie is a lot sillier than the first two. It's more over the top, to the point that it feels like the kind of movie the original Scream would have made fun of. And it's right from the opening scene. The second Ghostface pulls out the new voice changer that looks futuristic and allows Roman to imitate any voice he wants, because Scream is a science fiction thing now. You know what would have made that work? Ditch the tech, make the killer a voice actor. It takes place in Hollywood. The killer could be really good at impressions. I would buy that so much faster than the new voice changer bullshit. Making Roman the only killer also hurts the movie and makes it more ridiculous. Part of the cleverness of the two killer idea was that it was an explanation for how slasher killers could seemingly teleport in earlier films, the Friday the 13th series especially. Ghostface could be literally in two places at once, which did apply to Scream 3 at one point, but making it one killer does make Roman seem supernatural, amping up this movie's already ridiculous tone and breaking my suspension of disbelief a little bit. I don't hate the retcon of Roman being behind the original murder of Maureen, and I do love the mystery leading into it. The killer is leaving pictures of Maureen, and I killed her is written on the last one. Maureen was in Hollywood for a few years, but no one who knew her in Woodsboro knows anything about it. All of that is super intriguing. It's a captivating setup. So, on a conceptual level, I like the Roman twist. Execution, on the other hand, the major problem is that Sidney and Roman don't meet until he's revealed as the killer, and Campbell plays that moment perfectly. Her face reads, "Who the hell are you?" It's not a compelling reveal for her. There's no betrayal. It doesn't have the gut punch the previous killers provided. The only satisfying reveal in this film would have been Kincaid. That's the only character she forms a connection with, and she spends the most screen time with him. Maybe a little obvious, but sometimes things are obvious because they're the most natural. Being surprising isn't always a good thing, especially if your audience isn't invested. And who is invested in Roman? He has a couple of funny lines, and that's it. The biggest problem with all of this is that Sidney never learns about her mother or what happened to her. Gail, Dewey, and Jennifer are the ones who discover that information, and they don't tell Sid. Sure, they could have done it off-screen, but that's not good filmmaking. This is shattering information that would completely change the way Sid saw her mom, and it would have been really compelling to see her confront that. But the movie sidesteps it entirely, and pretends that because we, the audience, have that information, so does Sid. Roman certainly talks to her like she knows. When he's going on about what Milton did, She should be like, who the hell is John Milton? And he did what to my mother? This sibling rivalry idea had potential, and I feel like the movie squanders that potential in every possible way, which is a summation of the movie in general. Scream grossed $161.8 million against a $40 million budget. Reviews were mixed but leaned closer to negative. The general consensus is that it's the worst of the series. I actually think Scream 4 is worse, but we'll get to that in a different video. Scream 3 is a hot mess. It's nowhere near as clever, funny, or thrilling as the first two, and as a conclusion, it's not that satisfying. Sydney doesn't have enough screen time, and Gale and Dewey spend most of their increased screen time either poorly recreating their Scream 2 dynamic or walking around a mansion yelling names. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the movie. I have a lot of nostalgic fondness for this one. I vividly remember my mom coming home from Hollywood Video with the VHS when it came out, and I watched it constantly. And like I said, what little time Sid is given does really work, and she provides some of the series' best moments. I like a lot of Ghostface's dialogue, and I love that he gets to do a big supervillain monologue in the third act. Despite all of its flaws, it's a movie I really enjoy watching.